they won't give it to me. He knew that for certain. But what was it they had? Knowledge. How could he con someone when he didn't even know if they'd speak his language?
Fight.
Pause, Kelsier said, just as a test. Reservation, you there? No reply. He sighed, packing away his water skin. He glanced over his shoulder toward the direction he'd come from. Then he scrambled to his feet, ripping his knife from the sheath at his side and spinning about, putting the fire between him and what stood there.
Perfect.
The figure wore robes and had bright, flame-red hair. He bore a welcoming smile, but Kelsier could see spines beneath the surface of his skin. Pricking spider legs, thousands of them pushing against the skin and causing it to pucker outward in erratic motions. Ruin's puppet. The thing he'd seen the Force construct and dangle toward Vin. Hello, Kelsier, Ruin said through the figure's lips. My colleague is unavailable,
KO.
but I will convey your requests if you wish it of me.
Fight.
Stay back, Kelsier said, flourishing the knife, reaching by instinct for metals he could no longer burn. Damn, he missed that. Oh, Kelsier, Ruin said. Stay back? I'm all around you. The air you pretend to breathe, the ground beneath your feet. I'm in that knife and in your very soul. How exactly am I to stay back? You can say what you wish, Kelsier said, but you don't own me. I am not yours. Why do you resist so? Ruin asked, strolling around the fire. Kelsier walked the other direction, keeping distance between himself. Satisfaction of a job well done. These are from me. But it is done now, Kelsier. This planet is an elderly man, having lived his life in full, now wheezing his last breaths. It is not evil to give him the rest he demands. It's a mercy. Kelsier looked at that hand, which undulated with the pinprick pressing of the spiders inside.
Fight.
But who am I talking to? Ruin said with a sigh, pulling back his hand. A man who would not accept his own end, even though his soul longed for it, even though his wife longed for him to join her in the beyond. Oh, Kelsier, I do not anticipate you will see the necessity of ending. So continue to think me evil if you must.
Round 2.
Would it hurt so much, Kelsier said, to give us a little more time? Ruin laughed. Ever the thief, looking for what you can get away with. No. A reprieve has been granted time and time again. I assume you have no message for me to deliver them. Sure, Kelsier said. Tell Fuzz he's to take something long, hard, and sharp, then ram it up your backside for me. As if he could harm even me.
Fight.
You realize that if he were in control, nobody would age, nobody would think or live. If he had his way, you'd all be frozen in time, unable to act lest you harm one another. So you're killing him? As I said, Ruin replied with a grin. A mercy for an old man well past his prime.
Round 4.
But if all you plan to do is insult me, I must be going. It's a shame you'll be off on that island when the end comes. I assume you'd like to greet the others when they die. It can't be that close. It is, fortunately. But even if you could have done something to help, you're useless out here. A shame.
Final round.
Sure, Kelsier. And you came here to tell me that, rather than remaining quietly pleased that I was off being distracted by my quest. Kelsier recognized a hook when he saw one. Ruin wanted him to believe that the end was very near, that coming out here had been pointless, which meant it wasn't. Preservation said he couldn't leave to go where I'm going, Kelsier thought, and Ruin is similarly bound, at least until the world is destroyed. Maybe, for the first time in months, he'd be able to escape that squirming sky and the eyes of the destroyer. He saluted Ruin, tucked away his fire, then strode down the hill. "Running, Kelsier?" Ruin said, appearing on the hillside with hands clasped as Kelsier passed him. "You cannot flee your fate. You are tied to this world, and to me." Kelsier kept on walking, and Ruin appeared at the bottom of the hill in the same pose.
Round 1.
"Those fools in the fortress won't be able to help you," Ruin noted. "I think that once this world reaches its end, I will pay them a visit. They've existed far too long past what is right." Kelsier stopped at the edge of the new land of dark stone, like the lake that had become an island.
Round 2.
This one was even larger.
Fight.
The ocean had become a continent. "I will kill Vin long gone," Ruin whispered. "I will kill them all. Think about that, Kelsier, on your journey. When you come back, if there's anything left, I might have need of you.
KO.
Thank you for all you've done
Round
on my
3.
behalf."
Fight.
Kelsier stepped out onto the ocean continent, leaving Ruin behind on the shore. Kelsier could almost see the spindly threads of power that animated this puppet, providing a voice to the terrible force. Damn. Its words were lies. He knew that. They hurt anyway.
Round 4. Fight.
Part 5. Irene. 1. He'd hoped to have the sun back once Ruin vanished from the sky, but after walking far enough out, he seemed to leave his world behind, and the sun with it. The sky here was nothing but empty blackness. Kelsier eventually managed to use some vines to strap his flagging cookfire to the end of his staff, which became an improvised torch. It was a strange experience, hiking through the darkened landscape, holding a staff with an entire campfire on the top. But the logs didn't fall apart, and the thing wasn't nearly as heavy as it should have been. Not as hot, either, particularly if, when bringing it out, he didn't make it manifest fully. Plant life grew all around him, real to his touch and eyes, though of strange varieties, some with brownish-red fronds and others with wide palms. Many trees, a jungle of exotic plants. There were some bits of mist in here. If he knelt by the ground and looked for them, he could find little glowing spirits. Fish, sea plants. They manifested here above the ground, though in the ocean, on the other side, they were probably down within the depths. Kelsier stood up, holding the soul of some kind of massive deep-sea creature, like a fish, only as large as a building, in his hand, feeling its ponderous strength. That was surreal, but so was his life these days. He dropped the fish's soul and continued onward, hiking through waist-high plants with a blazing staff lighting the way. As he got farther from the shore, he felt a tugging at his soul, a manifestation of his ties to the world he'd left behind. He knew, without having to experiment, that this tug would ultimately grow strong enough that he wouldn't be able to continue outward. He could use that. The tugging was a tool that let him judge if he was getting farther from his world, or if he'd gotten turned around in the darkness. Navigation was otherwise next to impossible, now that he didn't have the canals and roadways to guide him. By judging the pull on his soul, he kept himself pointed directly outward, away from his homeland. He wasn't completely certain that was where he'd find his goal, but it seemed like his best bet. He hiked through the jungle for days, but then it started to dwindle. Eventually, he reached a place where plants grew only in occasional patches. They were replaced with strange formations of rock, like glassy sculptures. The jagged things were often some 10 feet or more tall. He didn't know what to make of those. He had stopped passing the souls of fish. Nothing seemed to be alive out here in either realm. The pull tugging him backward was growing laborious to fight. He was beginning to worry he'd have to turn around when, at long last, he spotted something new. A light on the horizon.
You win.
2. Top of his head was visible. The guards didn't notice him. He climbed back out of the ground and inched up to the base of the fortress wall. He pressed his hand against the glowing stone and was given the impression of a rocky wall far from here, in another place. An unfamiliar land with striking green plants. He gasped, pulling his hand away. These weren't stones, but the spirits of stones, like his spirit of a fire. They had been brought here and constructed into a building. Suddenly, he didn't feel quite so clever at having found himself a staff and a sack. He touched the stone again, looking at that green landscape. That was what Mare had talked about.
Round 2.
A land with an open blue sky. Another planet, he decided. One that didn't suffer our fate. For the moment, he ignored the image of that place, pushing his fingers through the spirit of the stone. Strangely, the stone resisted. Kelsier gritted his teeth and pushed harder. He managed to get his fingers to sink in about 2 inches, but couldn't make them go any farther. It's that light, he thought. It pushed back on him. Looks a little like the light of souls. Well, he couldn't slip through the wall. What now? He retreated into the shadows to consider. Should he try to sneak in one of the gates? He rounded the building, contemplating this for a short time before suddenly feeling foolish. He hurried forward to the wall again and pressed his hand against the stones, sinking his fingers in a few inches. Then he reached up and did the same with the other hand. Then he proceeded to scale the wall, entering a long stone corridor lit by the spiderwebs of power coursing across the walls, floor, and ceiling. The energy must keep the stones from evaporating, Kelsier thought. All the souls he'd brought with him had begun to deteriorate, but these stones were solid and unbroken. Those tiny lines of power were somehow sustaining the spirits of the stone, and perhaps as a side effect, keeping people like Kelsier from passing through the walls. He crept down the corridor. He wasn't sure what he was searching for, but he wouldn't have learned anything more by sitting outside and waiting. The power coursing through this place kept giving him visions of another world. And, he realized with discomfort, the energy seemed to be permeating him, mixing with his soul's own energy, which had already been touched by the power at the well. In a few brief moments, he had started to think that place with the green plants looked normal. He heard voices echoing in the hallway, speaking a strange language with a nasal tone. Prepared for this, Kelsier scrambled out a window and clung there, just outside. A pair of guards hurried through the hallway beside him, and after they passed, he peeked in to see that they were wearing long white-blue tabards, pikes at their shoulders. They had fair skin and looked like they could have been from one of the dominances, except for their strange language. They spoke energetically, and as the words washed across him, Kelsier thought, he thought he could make some of it out.
Round 3.
Yes, they speak the language of open fields, of green plants, of where these stones come from, and the source of this power. He's pretty sure he saw something, sir, one guard was saying. The words struck Kelsier strangely. On one hand, he felt they should be indecipherable. On the other hand, he instantly knew what they meant. How would that Trenodite have made it all the way here? The other guard snapped. It defies reason, I tell you. They passed through the doors at the other end of the hall. Kelsier climbed back into the corridor, curious. Had a guard seen him outside then? This didn't seem like a general alarm, so if he had been spotted, the glimpse had been brief. He debated fleeing, but decided to follow the guards instead. Though most new thieves tried to avoid guards during an infiltration, Kelsier's experience showed that you generally wanted to tail them, where they'd always stick close to the things that were most important.
KO.
He wasn't certain if they could harm him in any
Final
way,
round.
though he figured it would be best not to find out. So he stayed a good distance back from the guards. After curving through a few stone corridors, they reached a door and went in. Kelsier crept up, cracked it, and was rewarded by the sight of a larger chamber where a small group of guards was setting up a strange device. A large yellow gemstone the size of Kelsier's fist shone in the center, glowing even more brightly than the walls. That gem was surrounded by a lattice of golden metal holding it in place. All told, it was the size of a desk clock. Kelsier leaned forward, hidden just outside the door. That gemstone, that had to be worth a fortune. A different door into the room, one opposite him, slammed open, causing several guards to jump, then salute. The creature that entered seemed, well, mostly
Round
human.
one.
Wizened,
Fight.
dried up. The woman had puckered lips, a bald scalp, and strange silvery dark skin. She glowed faintly with the same quiet blue-white light as the walls. "What is this?" the creature snapped in the language of the green plants. The guard captain saluted. "Probably just a false alarm, Ancient One. Maud says he saw something outside." "Looked like a figure, Ancient One," another guard piped up.
Round two.
"Saw it myself.
Fight.
It tested at the wall, sinking its fingers into the stone, but was rebuffed. Then it retreated and I lost sight of it in the darkness." So he had been seen. Damn. At least they didn't seem to know he'd crept into the building. "Well, well," the ancient creature said. "My foresight does not seem so foolish now, does it, Captain? The powers of Trinity wish to join the main stage. Engage the device." Kelsier had an immediate sinking feeling. Whatever that device did, he suspected it would not go well for him. He turned to bolt down the corridor, making for one of the windows. Behind him, the powerful golden light of the gemstone faded. Kelsier felt nothing. "Well," the captain said from behind, voice echoing, "nobody from Trinity within a day's march of here. Looks like a false alarm after all." Kelsier hesitated in the empty corridor. Then, cautious, he crept back to peek into the room. The guards and the wizened creature all stood around the device, seeming displeased. "I do not doubt your foresight, Ancient One," the guard captain continued, "but I do trust my forces on the Trinidite border. There are no shadows here." "Perhaps," the creature said, resting her fingers on the gemstone. "Perhaps there was someone, but the guard was wrong about it being a cognitive shadow. Have the guards be on alert, and leave the device on just in case. This timing strikes me as too opportune to be coincidental. I must speak with the rest of the Irie."
Round one.
As she said the word, this time Kelsier got a sense of its meaning in the language of the green plants. It meant age. And he had a sudden impression of a strange symbol made from 4 dots and some lines that curved, like ripples in a river. Kelsier shook his head, dispelling the vision. The creature was walking in Kelsier's direction. He scrambled away, barely reaching the window and climbing out as the creature pushed open the door and strode through the hallway. New plan, Kelsier decided, hanging outside on the wall, feeling completely exposed. Follow the weird lady giving orders.
Round three.
He let her get a distance ahead of him,
Fight.
then entered the corridor and followed silently. She rounded the outer corridor of the fortress before eventually reaching the end of it, where it stopped at a guarded door. She passed inside, and Kelsier thought for a moment, then climbed out another window. He had to be careful. If the guards above weren't already keeping close watch on the walls, they soon would be. Unfortunately, he doubted he could get through that doorway without bringing every guard in the place down on him.
You win.
Instead, he climbed along the outside of the fortress. Creatures was sitting or standing. It was like they themselves were drawing in the light. He was at least able to pick out the woman from before, with her wizened lips and long fingers. Her robe had a thicker band of silver. "We must move up our timetable," she was saying to the others. I do not believe this sighting was a coincidence.
Round
Bah!
1.
Said a seated man who held a cup of glowing liquid. You always jump at stories, Illinois. Not every coincidence is a sign of someone drawing upon fortune. And do you disagree that it is best to be careful? Illinois demanded. We've come too far, worked too hard to let the prize slip away now. Preservation's vessel has nearly expired, another woman said. Our window to strike is approaching. An entire shard, Illinois said. Ours. And if that was an agent of ruin the gods spotted, asked the seated man, if our plans have been discovered, the vessel of ruin could have his eyes upon us at this very moment.
KO.
Illinois seemed disturbed by this, and she glanced upward as if to search the sky for the watching eyes of the shard. She recovered, speaking firmly. I will take the chance.
We will draw his anger either way.
Another of the beings noted.
If one of us ascends to preservation, we will be safe. Only then.
Kelsier chewed on this as the creatures fell silent. So someone else can take up the shard. Buzz is almost dead, but if someone were to seize his power as he died... But hadn't Preservation told Kelsier that such a thing was impossible? You wouldn't be able to hold my power anyway, Preservation had said. It tumbled into the room, shoulders popping into their previous shape. The experience left him with a splitting headache. He sat up, back to the wall, and waited for the pain to fade before standing to give this room a thorough ransacking. He didn't come up with much. A few bottles of wine, a handful of gemstones left casually in one of the drawers. Both were real, not souls pulled through to this realm. The room had a door leading into the inner parts of the fortress, and so, after peeking through, he slipped in. The next room looked more promising. It was a bedroom. He rifled through the drawers, discovering several robes like the ones the wizened people had been wearing. And then, in the small table by the hearth, the jackpot. A book of sketches filled with strange symbols like the one he had visualized. Symbols that he felt vaguely he could understand. Yes, these were writing, though most of the pages were filled with terms he couldn't begin to comprehend, even once he began to be able to read the symbols themselves. Terms like adonalsium, connection, realmatic theory. The end pages, however, described the culmination of the notes and sketches. A kind of arcane device in the shape of a sphere. You could break it and absorb the power within, which would briefly connect you to preservation, like the lines he'd seen in the space between moments. That was their plan. Travel to the location of preservation's death, prime themselves with this device, and absorb his power, ascending to take his place. Bold. Exactly the kind of plan Kelsier admired.
KO.
And now, he finally knew what he was going to steal from them. 3. Thievery was the most authentic form of flattery. What could be more satisfying than knowing the things you possessed were intriguing, captivating, or valuable enough to provoke another man to risk everything to obtain them? This was Kelsier's purpose in life, to remind people of the value of the things they loved, by taking them away. These days, he didn't care for the little thieveries. Yes, he'd pocketed the gemstones he'd found up above, but that was more out of pragmatism than anything else. Ever since the pits of Hath-Sin, he hadn't been interested in stealing common possessions. No, these days he stole something far greater. Kelsier stole dreams. He crouched outside the fortress, hidden between two spires of twisted black rock. He now understood the purpose of creating such a powerful building here at the reaches of Preservation and Ruin's dominion. That fortress protected a vault,
KO.
and inside that vault lay an incredible opportunity.